Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to Touching You Talk Show. My name is Elder Sheila Black, and I have an all-time favorite guest. Her name, her name is Nikki Chriesman-Green. How are you, Miss Attorney
I
Nikki?
am great. How are you? Thank you for letting me come on to talk today and squeezing this in. I know schedules are tight, but I am grateful for this opportunity. This is a very, 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 very important topic and one that I'm very passionate about, and that is voting, elections, and just making sure we're exercising our right to vote. So thank you.
So, for the sake of the people that don't know us and have never met us, how long have we known each other?
Forever.
You and me,
So
girl, we go
I
a
have known,
long way back.
yes, I've known Elder Black now, I would say for well over 25, maybe 25, 30 years, because I met her. So we now go to the same church, which is, we've been at the same church and I've been there for a while. But we met when I first started working at Aetna, which was my first job before I was even an attorney, before I was in law school, before all that. And that was back in 1998, I would say.
Okay, so we
Yeah,
met in
98,
2000.
99.
We
Yeah,
met
right in
in
2000.
2000.
So
Yeah.
yeah, about 20, yeah, 22, 23 years. Yep.
Yeah, so I am so excited
Great
to have
relationship.
you. Yes, yes. That's the reason why you don't burn bridges. That's the reason why you can never tell where God is going to take a person. Because, like you said, when I met you, you were not an attorney at that time.
I wasn't even in school.
Yeah, but now look at what the Lord God has done, and it's such a blessing. I am so happy to
Yeah, I
be
wasn't even in
connected.
undergraduate school when I met you. I wasn't even in college. I had took a break. I was not doing anything when I met you, but just
Well,
working and being a single parent. That's all.
well, I am so happy that the Lord God has connected us. So today we're
Yes.
talking about something that's very, very important, and we're talking about voting. So why is this so passionate and important to you, Attorney Nikki?
So voting, guys, it what gives us the opportunity to have some kind of say in the legislation that is passed. That legislation is and I'm going to say control. I know that many people struggle with those words, but it's the truth. I mean, those are what govern our ability to act or not act in a state. They are rules that impact our family members, our friends. When things happen, they are rules that impact our daily lives. For those that live in Texas, remember how the grid broke? I don't know how many of y'all are experiencing these high electric bills. All of this stuff is controlled by the people that we are electing to basically make laws and pass bills and have conduct and control committees that kind of govern how we will be able to act within our state. And so this is a midterm election, and a lot of us focus on the general election, which is where we have the vote for the president. Some of the Senate and the House is decided at that time, and there are other offices that are decided. But the midterms are your state elected officials. And there is a constitutional provision that allows the states to have certain authority. Under the Constitution, under Article 10, it says that the government shall have no right. So the federal government and the state governments are always in a fight with each other, which we've seen be played, I would say, since President Obama was in office. But basically, the federal government, if that power is not delegated to them in the Constitution, then the states are the ones that make that decision. So our state elections, our midterms, where we determine who is going to be our chief executive officer, like the governor, is where we have that decision, and we don't get to go and pass bills and and go and represent ourselves before Congress, before the United States, or even in the state legislature. Our votes and our voice is determined by who represents us in our district. And so when we are complaining and when we are frustrated with what we see, there's not any progress, or we like what somebody is doing. This is how you make that determination, is by voting. And so that's why I'm so passionate about it, because we have to look at our ancestors and what they fought for. And this is what many died for. This is what the struggle was for. This is what all of the protest and marching. This is what Martin Luther King, all of them, when they were saying we have a right to be treated a certain ways. African Americans, y'all, we have to exercise our right to vote. And if you don't, it will get taken away, because they are actively, and when I say they, certain legislatures are active, certain states are actively seeking ways to restrict the vote, to limit people's voice, and to change the way that elections are held. And so we got to make sure that we are exercising that right that has been given to us before that right is taken away or restricted. So that's why I'm so passionate about it.
Okay. So what are we going to talk about first?
So what I want to talk about first is one of the questions, and I want to take this like back to elementary school. A lot of times when we're voting, and this is myself as well, it's intimidating because you're looking at this ballot and you have to determine, why am I voting for this? What is even on this ballot? What does this office even do? How does that impact me? And so what I would like to do first of all is I want to kind of paint a timeline of voting, right? So the time to register to vote is gone. So we're not going to spend time talking about that, because if you haven't registered, you've missed that opportunity. That deadline was October the 11th. There are some new laws in the state of Texas that govern conduct at the poll. They govern your eligibility to vote. They govern the times and the method, the manner in which we're able to vote, and they also govern what activities can take place at the polls. So we're going to talk about that at the end. But what I wanted to do is just kind of take it back and say, what is the midterm election? Who is on my ballot? Now, I'm not going to, because I understand that this is a talk show, and Elder Black has a wide variety of audiences, and I don't believe in telling people who to vote for. I do have my recommendations, because there are several personal friends of mine that are not just friends, but they have the character. As being an attorney, I've been able to meet a lot of the candidates in the course of um, doing my job, and so I know them personally. And so I definitely, if anyone wants to reach out to me outside of the show to get some personal information on the candidates, Elder Sheeta Black will share my information. I'd be more than happy to do that, but I'm not going to influence anybody on how to vote. But I do want you to know what offices are on the ballot and how those offices affect you, so you can do your research between now and when you go vote. So early voting starts Monday. I encourage everybody to get a sample ballot, and I'm about to walk you through how to do that in a minute. And share the screen and kind of take you to the websites. We will also have these available um, in um, in the chat, or however Elder Black wants to put that up in on YouTube or on her Facebook page. But let's talk about the offices that are on the ballots, right? And so when we're looking at a midterm election, it's called a midterm because it happens in the middle of the president's term. So it can literally shift the way that the legislatures are voting, because if there's an influx, like right now, the House is Democratic control, the Senate is right there at the borderline, it's 50-50. Any votes could push either party into the majority. And so by doing that, it kind of shifts the way, depending on what party the president is in, on how the offices will work to get bills passed, right? So there's a ton of bills that are pending. And so they're looking at, right now we have a Democratic president. And like I said, the Democrats control the House. They do not control the Senate. It's basically split down the middle. So that's why it gives you the opportunity to bring people in and bring people out. But more importantly, it allows us to determine the state leadership positions. So we have the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, land commissioner, agricultural commissioner, comptroller. We have one of the 3 seats on the Railroad Commission. We have district-based congressional and legislative offices. So that's our own state. And then we have some that will go into represent us in the United States Congress, such as Representative Eddie Bernice Johnson. She stepped down. And so Jasmine Crockett is one of the candidates. I know a lot of people saw that. She's running. There's other contenders as well, but you have to be in District 30 to run. So those are the kind of offices that are up for the ballot. We also have some local seats for our legislatures that will represent us in the Texas Senate and House. And most importantly, we have the State Board of Education, which is really important, and a large number of judicial candidates will be decided in this election. So including our county commissioner's court. And so I'm going to talk about now each one of these offices, and I'm going to tell you how they impact you, so that when you're looking at why do I need to vote or who am I voting for, you'll have an idea of why this is important. So the first one is the governor. I think we all understand how the governor is. The governor of the state is kind of like the president of the United States. They are our chief executive officer. They are the ones that determine, they're on the thing for 4 years. Texas does not have a term limit. I think they might want to look into that. The governor makes policy recommendations for the lawmakers in both the state and the House. They also introduce and veto bills. So if they don't like something, they can veto it and it'll go back and forth. Like, for example, the voting bill that kept going back and forth last year, that in the last legislative session that got us to where we're at. They also are our commander-in-chief with respect to any kind of military forces, natural disasters. They can convene a special session of the legislature. Let me explain what that means. If the legislature is in a session, which right now Texas is biennial. So that means they do it every other year. In the last legislative session, there were 3 special sessions. And what that basically means is that if the decisions of the House and the Senate are not passed, those bills are not passed, if the governor feels like he wants to get something passed, guess what? He can call another session. Last year we had 3 special sessions in addition to the regular session. And so what it did was it kind of like with redistricting, which is a big issue right now, it kind of pushed it back. And so because the sessions kept going back, like our last session ended in September of last year. So we had several. We have another legislative session that will start in January of this year. Lots of bills, gun measures, criminal justice reform, additional voting laws, education laws with respect to critical race theory, and just all kind of bills on transgendered care and CPS. There's a lot that will be on the agenda. The governor has the power to call as many special sessions as he wants. So if something doesn't get done in May, he can say, I want to do another one to keep everybody there, to make them keep doing it. And so that's something to keep in mind because we're giving him that power. They also, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So when you talk about the issues that they're talking about or they're voting on, do we as American citizens have the opportunity to know exactly what that is?
You do not get any kind of insight in what's his policy or agenda. You know what insight we have? We have 2 candidates running for governor right now. All we have to go by is what they're saying in their campaign. Now, when they get in office, do they technically do that? Right? That's all I'm gonna say. Okay.
It's to be seen. It's to be seen.
This is my campaign promise. But then when you get in the office, well, it's more than that. And so that's why it's important. You can look at a person's conduct, especially when you have an incumbent that's been in the office, and look at where we're at and say, does this person deserve to continue in that same way? And I'm gonna leave it at that. So that's just something to think about. And so that's what the governor is. The governor has a lot of power, guys, right? They determine policy with respect to our money, policy with respect. They get to appoint people to committees. They get to do a lot of stuff. And that brings me to the next office, lieutenant governor.
So hold on, before you move forward, I do see that we do have a couple of people watching. So I just want to say that if you all have any questions, just jump in there and type it in the chat, and we will get Attorney Nikki to actually respond to your questions.
Okay. And if I'm going too fast, y'all let me know.
Yeah, tell her to slow down.
I can go. Like, say slow, because I'll just and I'll be gone because we do this all the time. So back to lieutenant governor, guys. A lot of us just overlook these ballots. We go and we vote, and you got to vote down on the ballot, meaning that you don't get to just check at the top of the box and say all Democrats or all Republicans. No. Go down each single box on the ballot. And when you're voting, you need to know who the candidates are. Do your research before you go in there. And you also need to look at what does their job do, so you'll know how it impacts you. I just talked about the governor. I think it's all common sense. We know what the governor does. Lieutenant governor. Y'all, the lieutenant governor right now is the second highest executive office in the government of Texas. They are the presiding officer. They control the work of the Texas Senate. They also control the budgeting process through the Legislative Budget Board. And lieutenant governor, also, Texas is different than other states. And so in other states, you don't have lieutenant governors that have as strong of a role in that position. But here, our lieutenant governor regularly is exercising his function as the Senate. He stays up there. He establishes all the special standing committees, all of the appoints all of the chairpersons and the members to the legislative committee. So when we're looking at who's going to be on the voting legislative committee or the gun control legislative committee, that's the man that is. And I see that we have a question on who are the candidates for lieutenant governor. Let me make sure we don't have any write-ins real quick, because let me pull up my little sample ballot. We don't. I know in Dallas, I don't know how many people you might want to. Do you want to do a little roll call? How many people are in Dallas? They had a couple of write-in candidates. Some I met the other day. So that's an interesting position. Give me 1 second. So for The lieutenant governor, you have Dan Patrick, he's the incumbent. He's a Republican, and he has been in the office for a minute. We have Mike Collier, who is the Democrat. So Mike Collier is interesting because Mike Collier used to be a Republican, switched over to the Democratic side. So those are our two candidates for lieutenant governor.
Okay.
And I'm gonna Dan Patrick
and Mike Collier.
Dan Patrick is the one that's been in the office, so you can look at his track record and say, do I want to keep that? Right.
Okay. Collier is Collier.
IER. Yes, correct. Okay. He's a Democrat. So those are the two candidates for that. Great question. I'm going to show you how to pull up your ballot in a second. So that's one of the things we were going to go through. The Attorney General. Attorney General, third highest office in the state of Texas, guys. He is the chief lawyer and legal officer for the state of Texas. And you want to know what's funny? When we were doing research for this position, y'all want to, do you think, I'm going to do a poll. Do you guys think, some of you may already know, do you have to be a lawyer to be the attorney general in Texas?
I would say yes. How are you going to be an attorney general if you're not an attorney?
You do not have to be an attorney.
Oh my goodness.
No, you don't, because your little divisions and the agencies that you control have the attorneys that will, if they need to litigate, because he's not litigating personally, but he is the one that decides who's going to litigate. Now, Ken Paxton is an attorney in Texas. You guys have seen all the legal trouble he has. But the attorney general is the one that defends the laws of the Constitution of the state of Texas. They are the ones that file the lawsuits for the state of Texas, or their office does, right? So they were the ones that filed the lawsuit against the ACA that went back up. The courts turned it back down. They were also the office that did the abortion, you know, when they were litigating the abortion, and they filed the litigation against that with the Supreme Court. So that's the office of the attorney general. They also control the child support division. I don't want to badmouth the child support division, but as an attorney that has dealt with family law stuff, lots of changes need to be made. Lots of changes. Some of the men that are in that system are wrong, are being done wrong. I'm just going to be honest. And then some of the parents, they don't put the same emphasis, I would say, on certain cases. And I can say that because I work in those offices and I do that. Because some people may say, well, I do the work. And so I've worked with these offices, and I don't mind going on record and saying that changes need to be made. Right. But that's the attorney general. So he has his hand in everything. And so that's a very important position, guys. And you want to make sure that when you're looking at who is representing us as an attorney general, character matters, experience matters, diversity matters, and what their primary agenda and priorities are matters. And that's all I'm going to say about that. The next one is the land commissioner. I want to focus on these next couple of offices because a lot of us kind of glance over this. I used to do it. So that's why I know me personally, I'm talking about me personally. I didn't know what they did. And to be honest with you, I just would look at the names and say who was probably sounded the best, right? Or if somebody told me to vote for somebody, that's what I would do. But you want to take a look at what they are doing and how does that impact me? And the reason why is because it helps you see who's been in the office, what's been happening, do changes need to be made? The land commissioner, some of their duties are going to be, again, chairing key state boards. They manage mineral rights, state assets, and investments. So the commissioner has the duty to manage all of the state-owned land and assets in a way that can make revenue, right? So they can commission an energy company to conduct tests on a specific piece of land. They can determine the availability of commercially viable oil and initiate production. So they are the ones, if somebody wants to build something or they want property or that's your land, right? So think about some of the buildings and gentrification and just different things that are happening, right? That's the office that is over all of that, okay? So then we want to get to the Texas Agriculture Commissioner.
Okay, Nikki, let me go back to another question we had here. Did you say that Paxton was running for
child? Yes,
running again.
He is running. He is running. There's also another individual running who is attorney. She is an attorney. She's been practicing for a while. She has done a lot of work in various offices. Her name is, and I should know this because I voted for her. Rochelle Mercedes is also running. Rochelle Mercedes Garza. So Rochelle Garza is a Democrat. She's running. She has a lot of experience. She's worked for the ACLU. She's worked for a lot of the. She's done criminal. She's done civil. She's done all kinds of stuff. So she has a wide variety. But I mean, look the ballot up yourself and get your get your information. But yeah, Kim Paxton is running again. So
so Attorney Nikki, let's just go ahead and put this out here. Now, we're not trying to influence.
I agree.
We want to reiterate that we're not trying to influence. We're not trying to endorse. Mm-hmm. We are just sharing the information so that you can empower yourself to pick the candidate that properly aligns with what you believe and what you want to happen and what you want to see. So I just wanted to put that out there again.
Thank you. So the Texas Agriculture Commissioner is on the ballot. Why does that matter? I'm just going to give you what I think is important. They do all of the produce. They do all consumer protection with respect to grocery stores, retail pricing, healthy living. They are the ones, guys, that control like our students, our kids' lunch programs at school. They are also the ones, and I know that we know a lot of people that do feeding programs. They kind of are the ones that set the rules and set the govern those kind of policies that allow you to do the feeding program. So look at who's in office now. Look at those that are running and their experience, because that's an important office, because you want to make sure that our kids have access to healthy lunches. We also want to make sure that the budgets are being controlled in the way that they should. Our grocery stores, I don't know about y'all, but there's been like a lack of food that's available. And I know that's the countrywide, United States wide problem, but still these are offices that manage that, right? That manage ports, they manage the trade, and they manage all of that stuff. And they do it with respect to the grocery stores. They also are in control of economic development, right? They provide the tools for communities to attract businesses and other opportunities. They do infrastructure and the development of state broadband services. So they have a lot of responsibilities. And so the agricultural office is very, very important. I also want to talk about the comptroller. So when you hear a comptroller, what do you immediately think about? Money.
I'm like, somebody that's in charge.
Money. So the comptroller has the duty to collect tax revenue that is owed for the state of Texas. So this involves the different types of taxes, from sales tax. Texas does not have a personal income tax, so they do, like, for example, battery sale tax. They also have other types of ways that they get the money in for other types of taxes. So the comptroller's office is going to be responsible for, like I said, collecting and remitting that portion of the tax to the various cities, counties, that they control money that we need, right? That is collected from the contracts. The Railroad Commission. Now, this is funny, because when you hear the Railroad Commission, what's the first thing that you think about? What do we think?
Train?
No, they don't even regulate the railroad. Okay, they used to back in the day when they were initially created by the Constitution. That was their primary focus. But over the years, they've taken that function away from them. So when we're in there voting for the Railroad Commissioner, the first thing you're thinking about is the trains. No. They are the state agency. They got 3 people and they have staggered terms. So you vote for them like every 2 years. So there's only 1 seat that's up right now. But they were created to oversee, their responsibilities include regulating our oil and our gas industry and like the economic and our Texas Natural Resource Code. Why is that important? ERCOT, the grid, our oil, gas, they manage that. They appoint people to the committees, the chairs, and all of the different councils that regulate our energy and oil and energy sections. So they are the ones. Last year, in the last legislative session, Texas has the Texas Energy Reliability Council that was appointed by the railroad commissioners. And so they are the people that are controlling that. I don't know if y'all's electric bills have went up, right? But I know mine has. And so these are the people. When we, with the ERCOT grid and just how we use our natural resources, how we're using our oil and our gas and our energy, that's them. Okay. So think about that when you're voting. Then next is our county commissioner. And I'm getting now to our local counties. The county commissioner's court, guys, they are referred to as the judge. but they're not the same as the criminal judge. They're not the same as like the family law judge. The county commissioner, right, is the office that exercises, they have broad policy making authority. So they are going to represent the county. So we have the Tarrant County Commissioner's Office. We have the Dallas County. Glenn Whitley is Dallas County Commissioners. Who is our guy right now? Or is Glenn Whitley ours? He might be ours. I'm sorry. Yeah, Clay is Dallas. Glenn Whitley is ours. He's not rerunning. So you got Deborah Peoples running, and then there's another candidate that's running as well. But they are responsible for building, maintaining our roads, our bridges, but they are also responsible for our emergency management system services. Think back to COVID-19, all decisions to shut down, monies, how those things are handled, all flow through the commissioner's court. They are the top office that decides what we're doing in connection with the mayor. And so the county judge, which is what you see, like I said, Deborah Peoples, and this is in Tarrant County because I have their ballot. Let me go on here and see who's on the Tarrant County ballot. Give me a sec. So on the Tarrant County ballot, we have Justice, the commissioner. Yep, we have that's precinct number 2. Where's the commissioner? Give me 1 second, guys. I want to see all of the candidates that are running because I don't want to say their names wrong. I'm just looking for them.
So while you're looking at that, is it a good idea to go any, meeny, miny, mo?
No. No, and I'm fixing to pull up your ballot. No,
you know what? I'm kidding, but I am so serious.
I am so serious too. Please don't do that. I used to do that. That's what I'm telling you. I would look at names and like, oh, that's a nice name, because I didn't know who these people were. Hadn't looked them up. Didn't have any information or insight into who they were. And that's not the right way to do it, because you need to be looking at records, what these people's backgrounds are, what they've been doing. And there we go. So Tim O'Hare and then Deborah Peoples. Deborah Peoples had ran for mayor against Maddie Parker this past season in Fort Worth. And so she's on the Tarrant County ballot, and so is he. In Dallas, you have, what's the name? I think Clay is rerunning, if I'm not mistaken. Commissioner. I'll look it up in a minute. No, county commissioner, do we not see that on there? Is he running unopposed? So they do have a list, so we'll keep going. But those are the county judge, like I said, has a lot of responsibilities. They're the presiding officer of the commissioner's court. They represent the county in administrative functions. They are the budget officers for all of the counties. Most of them have broad judicial duties, and they can preside over misdemeanor, criminal, small civil cases, probate matters in some states. But they are the head of emergency management. I think that's what makes it, because they're the ones that make decisions for our county in crisis, right? And so you want somebody that's level-headed, experienced, and also that is diverse, and they understand how these decisions may impact people. Then you have your local judges. I cannot stress enough, and not just local judges, our Supreme Court judges. Supreme Court establishes precedent. So when the Supreme Court makes a decision, guys, they kind of tell you how a law is interpreted, and they are the ones that kind of set the role. So you have Supreme Court nominees on the ballot, and then you have your local judicial candidates. Criminal law, family law, probate, the county courts, the probate courts, the civil court at laws, the little JP courts. JP courts are real important, because in your JP courts, guys, you have people that don't have any legal experience that run. I'm not against that, but I do want you to understand this. If I have a small claims court, I'm representing myself pro bono and I'm going into court, I want to go before somebody that actually knows how to decide my case. If you're deciding an eviction, I want you to have experience with respect to what that means for a tenant, what that means for a landlord. I don't want business people and other people that just want a title being on the bench. Look into your candidates, because it is important. And so that's something to think about. But we will have, go ahead. Uh-huh.
Are you saying that I could apply to be a
JP? Mm-hmm. You could.
Maybe we should do that. Just kidding.
We need more like you. But those are just some of the things that are on your ballot. And so if you are curious as to who is running, I'm going to share my screen real quick, because I'm going to show you the websites to go and how to on the present. And I'm going to share my screen.
All right. And again, we want to say 9 minutes later, we're not trying to tell you who to vote for. We're just showing you where to go So you can see who, or you can consider who you would like to vote for.
Yes. And I have a lot of stuff open, guys. Just ignore it. I'm always multitasking. So this is the Texas Secretary of State website. This is a very important website because this governs our entire rules, right? It talks about voters. They have made this page very, they have updated this page and added a lot of information. And the reason why is because, Texas changed the voting laws, right? With respect to poll monitoring and all of that stuff. And they did change that in the last legislative session. So guys, educate yourself on, for voters, what's on the ballot, where's my polling place, election results. They also should have general questions on how to become a poll worker, file an election complaint. If you are going to do an application for ballot by mail, and I'll go over, we're going to spend the last couple of minutes talking about the conduct at the polls and how I could get my vote in. Okay. But these are the pages that they have voting in person. What happens when I'm voting in person, right? Where's my polling place? They also, what's allowed at the polling places. Guys, get familiar with this website. Again, this is the Secretary of State. This talks about what is allowed under Texas law. You cannot bring your phone inside the poll. You had somebody the last time that was video recording an incident that happened in the poll. You just invalidated to vote. Like, don't do that. There are poll monitors there. Try to know who's doing what. I will be working at the polls. I'm going to work in East Fort Worth because I believe that there are some areas where we are typically underserved. And so look for, if you know people, if you yourself want to do it, volunteer to be a poll monitor, volunteer to work at the polls. What you can or cannot wear is another issue that it talks about. So I can't wear a shirt that says I vote Beto or I vote for Beto or one of their campaign slogans. But if you wear a Black Lives Matter shirt or you wear other kind of shirts, does not invalidate your vote. And I want you to know that. But I'm just going to give you this hint. If you don't have to wear it, don't. Why even create the issue that could prevent your vote from being, it's not that important. Just go there and get your vote on. You can do whatever you want to do afterwards. You could do it on the weekend. You could do it before, but just go in there and be about voting. But this page tells you all the stuff that can and can't be done. This is the Texas Secretary of State. They also have a number for, they talk about curbside voting, right? Assistance at the polls, what you can and cannot do. So this document has a lot, these websites have a lot of information. And again, that is the Texas, the initial, if we want to write this in the
yeah, I was gonna ask you to just copy and paste it like in the post.
Sure. So let me go to the beginning. So this is the first page, copy. And then I don't know how. See, you got me.
You see the chat box?
Right here, chat with everyone in the studio?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the first one. And then let's go back. This is after I go on there for voters. This is the website that gives me all of that individual great information I was just sharing with you. Okay. Now let's talk about individual elections. So this is the Tarrant, if you live in Tarrant County. Guys, this is an important page. Check your status before you go vote, because guess what? Under the new laws, they can purge your voting. They always could, but they are actively doing that. And if you haven't voted in like 2 years, they have a right to purge or suspend your voting registration. And so you want to make sure that there aren't any complications when you get ready to vote at the poll. So go ahead and early check your status as a voter. You can also get a sample ballot here. It talks about free rides to the polls. And guess what? If you have time, you can actually volunteer to be one of those individuals that drive people. They also have a great location wait times. I used this when I was voting because it let me know where to go, so I wouldn't have to wait in a long line, especially if when I had to get back to work. And so I did take advantage of this. It was actually working. It was in real time, and it was very helpful. They also have the sample ballot, right? This is where you can go and you can say, are you registered? I'll use myself as, if anybody wants to come visit me in my house, I probably won't be here, but but this tells you, hold on. Okay, so this tells you your voting. You see voter status, A is good. A means active. I also kind of say approved, right? has all of your district information, who represents you. You can look up who is your current representatives. Look at this. I'm in County Commissioner, District 01. My U.S. representative is in District 25, my state senator, my constable. Why is this important? Because when you go vote on your ballot is going to be representative of your district. And so I may not, like, for example, the United States District 30 that was at Representative Eddie Bernice Johnson, I'm not a part of that. So I can't vote for any of that. If I want to vote for a Dallas judge, I can't, because I don't have any jurisdiction there. So I'm only going to be able to vote for who is in my district. Like even with the college district, I'm in TC6. So somebody else may be in a different one. So you have to look up those individuals that represent your section, right? You can go down here and get a sample ballot. When you pull up that sample ballot, it will have all of the candidates listed. So you can review those candidates ahead of time, which is always a great thing to do, and take notes. You can take those notes with you to the election poll if you want. But you want to make sure that I am looking at every single person, because again, you may have write-in votes. You may have other candidates that are not a part of a major party. And so you just want to kind of look at every single thing that you can. Then they also have voting locations based on where I live. Right. And so this is helpful, because then I can find out where I'm going. That is in Tarrant County. And so I think I already put the Tarrant County. Did I do Tarrant County? Yep, I did. So if I'm not in Tarrant County, let's say I'm in Dallas County. Dallas County has the same thing. Right. We look up everything else for these cells. We need to look up stuff for our voting. So I just put that in there. The Dallas website has a generic sample ballot. They have the write-in candidates. Voter eligibility. Am I eligible? I was looking up a friend earlier, so that's her name that's there. So again, these are just, again, they got information on elected officials, candidate information, if you want to run. There is also, I believe, on the Texas Secretary of State page, they might have a list of all of the candidates that registered, that did all of that stuff, because that's important too. If I have a candidate that's running, I want them to, if they can't follow simple instructions to get on the ballot, right? And it may be extenuating circumstances, right? So I'm not going to say that for everybody, because you may have some people that are right in that, have some difficulties with signatures or other stuff that happen. But you just want to make sure that you're paying attention to all of that. And so are there any questions about the mechanics or the offices that are on the ballot? I know I went through that fast in the sample ballots. Okay, perfect. So now let's talk about voting, right? I kind of gave y'all a little bit of a spiel. One of the things to always keep in mind, guys, is that what is my time frame for voting? I know last year there were some people that said, the times of the polls were different. So the voting times are set by your election administrators, right? Those election administrators are they get appointed and by your local county officials, right? And so you got to make sure that, one, I'm eligible to vote. You need to also cure any impediments to your voting. Your address. There is a new felony. If I register, or if I go and I make a vote and I'm not voting the way that I should, any kind of fraudulent activity with voting, that could be as simple as an address. If I vote in one district and I live in a different district and I haven't updated my address, that can be a problem. Especially if I knew it, because what they look at is intent. And one of the questions that kept coming up, and this is funny, but when you look at where I reside, right? Sometimes you have kids that are older that don't live with you, haven't lived with you, just haven't updated their address. They might live over here, but their mailing address is still your home. If they are if they are coming over and they are voting in your district, but they live somewhere else in a different district, and they know that they live in that district, and they address on their driver's license matches where they live, but they're still voting in your district, that could be considered a felony. Again, as an attorney, it's the way that you look at it. But with the new laws that they put in place, guys, they are actively looking for any kind of fraud. So you want to be careful about that. And some of the other, let me give y'all some other examples.
So when you say the best practice is to vote, I mean, you have to make sure that you're voting where your driver's license say that you live.
You need to make sure that you have registered to vote and your information on your driver's license is accurate.
Okay.
That helps. So you want to make sure everything is matching up. If it matches up with your driver's license, this is, but if your driver's license has already been changed and you just didn't change anything else, then that's a problem, because a lot of us still use our older parents, and I use that as an example because that's a very frequent one, but I just want to talk about a couple of other like instances of things that they're looking at, right? With respect, there is a felony now with a fine of $1,000 to $5,000 and up to 5 years in prison if a person who attempts to vote in someone else's name or other fraudulently votes, a person who attempts to vote more than once in the same election, a person who attempts to impersonate another person to vote, or a poll manager, any poll monitor that violates any of their duties. It's a state jail felony for up to 2 years in jail and a fine to up to $10,000. If you knowingly commit perjury by making a false statement on a voter registration application or while completing an oath, declaration, or affidavit required by the election code. That's where the address comes in, right? When you're doing your voter's registration, you're not updating it. There's a way for you guys to go on to your portal on the Secretary of State website. That's where I just showed you, that lets you update your information in real time. So you can still update your address and update things with respect to your registration.
So we do have a question.
How does that work? So the military is a little bit interesting because when you're in the military, you can do the absentee. That's where the absentee ballot comes in if you have an intent to reside where you live at and you are temporarily deployed overseas. Now, what happens is, let's say you're just in another state in the United States. It's like with college students that are living somewhere else. You can't vote twice. So you got to pick where you want that to be. In most cases, it's going to be, where is my intent to reside? If your intent to reside is here, then you do what's called the absentee ballot, or you do the mail-in ballot, right? One of those things. The absentee, though, I think is what works for military. They do absentee. But the state jail felony also expands the crime of illegal voting to include voting in an election in Texas after voting in an election in another state in which a federal officer doing it twice. Intentionally causing a false statement to be provided to an election official, or a mail-in ballot application, or the return of an election result form. So when you're filling in your mail-in ballot, if you are saying I need to vote, because when you do a mail-in ballot, everybody thinks that I can just do a mail-in ballot if I want to, right? When you are requesting a mail-in ballot, hold on, let me find it. To be eligible to vote early by Texas, so the requirements for and deadlines for requesting a mail-in ballot and voting by mail. So to be eligible to vote early by mail in Texas, you must be 65 years of age or older, be sick or disabled, or be confined in jail but otherwise eligible. Be out of the county on election day and during the period for early voting by personal appearance, so that would be military, or be expected to give birth within 3 weeks before or after the election day. So that would be any time between October 18th through November 29th. If you're going to vote by mail, you have to provide one of the following numbers on your ballot: the driver's license, a personal identification number, your election ID certificate. There is a free photo ID that is issued by the Department of Public Safety for voting purposes. I don't know if people knew about that. So you could definitely use that. And so that number can be used as well. Your voter ID, unique ID number that's on your ballot registration card can also be used, or the last 4 digits of your social. To request that mail-in applicant, you got to go into on that voter website. I believe that there was the link on the Secretary of State page where you can request that mail-in ballot. Guys, that mail-in ballot needs to be received, right, by the election day. You can mail it off, okay? If you need to cure an election ballot, you can cure that ballot by, and that means if you receive a notice that it was rejected, which is why I don't recommend you wait, right? Because after a while, you're not going to be able to do that. But applicants that must apply to vote by mail by October 28th, so it's not automatic. So you need to apply to do the voting by mail. So there's a whole process. So if you're voting by mail, you're not going to be here, you're going to be out of town, or there's something going on, you can't do early voting, or you can't do it on election day. Go ahead and go online to the Secretary of State website and click on mail-in ballot so you get all of the information. Get your ballot in and get that mailed off before. Keep a copy of when you mail it off. Take a picture of the day you mail it off and put it in the mail. But you want to do that, okay? If they carrier envelopes that are postmarked, must be postmarked by 7 p.m. on election day. So you can do it on election day, but they have to be received by the 9th.
So
go ahead.
What are some of the reasons why it will, they will reject it?
One, you're not eligible to vote by mail. Number 2, your ID and or any information that you've entered with respect to prior voter registration cards, because they do it like a check, does not match what you put on the application. Number 3, your address is not correct. Your identification was not provided. Like you didn't provide a driver's license number. You didn't provide you didn't provide a social security or the proper identification, or your ballot it doesn't look like it's checked, or there's like, it looks like maybe 1 or 2 people are checked if you're not watching how you're checking on the ballot, or there's something that looks wrong with your ballot per se. And so they'll try to fix it, right? And send it back. But if you don't do that in a timely manner, you kind of mess that up. And so me personally, early voting, guys, is such a benefit, and we really should take advantage of it because it allows you to get it in and over with. You don't got to wait in those long lines on election day. Going in person, you got 2 whole weeks. And so if you know you're going to be out of town, that's one thing. But if you can schedule it, like I'm going out of the country, I will be voting Monday morning before I leave because I don't want to take it to chance when I get back. And then I'm also going to volunteer on election day. We got to make sure we're keeping this stuff in our mind and the dates in our mind, right? One of the other thing that comes up a lot too is the polling places, like looking at what time they're open. During early voting, some of them may close at 5. They may not be open till 7. Some of them may open earlier than the others and open later than the others. So be aware of the time and how they're open. There's some regulations with respect to time, but they can close at 5 while some close at 7 if they're open earlier. And so you got to keep that in mind too. It says we can use our driver's licenses to vote if we're registered. Though that is correct. That happens to me all the time. I don't ever take that card because I have a hard time finding it. You know, you get it and then the mail and then you kind of just toss it. So yeah, I do. And I also, like I said, I check my one thing that I do is I check my voter registration before I go, and I do write down my voter ID unique number so that when I get my ballot at the thing, I can kind of compare because it'll have your voter information on there. So that's something to think about too. Curbside voting. So there are a lot of restrictions now with respect to the curbside voting, guys. It is allowed only for voters that have physical or other health issues and are unable to enter the polling place without personal assistance. You have to request it. But what that means is every location should have some kind of setup for curbside or for those that are unable to get in. If you do not see that, that is a violation. And what they typically do is they will have you call in a number and say, hey, I'm out here, or they'll have someone monitoring it. And so that person comes out with a machine. They take that person's vote at the car, and then you're recording. You can drop off. One of the things that I saw at the last election is there were a lot of polling places that were not staffed. And the people that were disadvantaged were those people that could not get out and vote. And I remember there was a lady sitting there and she was upset because it was like 6:00. She would not have made it to another location. And she was crying because nobody came out. I went in there and I asked them, hey, is there somebody doing outside? Because we got people waiting. They told me that they were shortage on election workers, so they didn't have anybody to go outside. I know that's not acceptable. So I said, no, ma'am, we need to take one of these people that are in here and put them to that outside. And so you're just going to lose one position in the inside. And the people have to wait. Because as long as you're in the line, you can vote. As long as you're in the line, they cannot stop the line because it's 7:00. Everybody gets to vote. So there were lines in Houston last year to like 10 or 11 at night because there were so many people that came in and they were having problems with the polls and with the machine. So do not get discouraged, guys. Do not get discouraged if you have to be in a long line. Just stay in that line, keep it trucking. Make sure that you are not allowing anybody to tell you that you can't vote because of this or this or that. And so we had somebody come out and help that individual. Now, there are some laws that are geared towards assisting a voter. So let me go over that, okay? So voters that are illiterate, physically disabled, prevented from reading or marking their ballot, non-English speakers, or only communicators using ASL may receive assistance for voting. The assistant that helps you has to take an oath to mark the ballot to avoid influencing the voter. So now there's a requirement because there's some rules in there. Voters may be assisted by any person that the voter chooses who is not an election worker, 2 election workers on election day, or 1 election worker during early voting. So they even have the numbers, right? The mail-in ballots. If you're assisting a person, you must complete the official carrier envelope of the voter with their name and address. You got to indicate your relationship to that voter. Voters cannot compensate another person for assistance, and assistance cannot be the voter's employer or agent of employer or a union agent or officer. Why is that important? Sometimes our family will come and ask us how to help. People say, Nikki, who are the candidates? If I go over there and I start telling you how to vote and how to fill in that box, I'm basically assisting a voter. I have to make sure that if I do that, I sign an oath, that I make sure that that information has been properly turned in and that I've been identified. Now, if somebody calls me over the phone and just says, Nikki, where did I get those ballots from? Like I'm doing now, that's different. But if I'm actually assisting that individual and they don't meet any of those conditions, I could be accused of violating the law. That is now a criminal penalty. Okay. Um, we got about 7 minutes. Are there any questions? I want to kind of open it up, or any concerns before.
I wanted to ask, how do you become a poll monitor? How do you volunteer for that?
So I have a ton of resources for that. Give me 1 second. I'm going to put it up there. You can do, let's see, non-legal volunteers for the NAACP. I'm going to put this in the chat.
Do you see where you can chat in the comments rather than the private chat?
Probably so. This is the election protection hotline. If you see anything funny at the polling place, call in real time. There are attorneys and other professionals that are staffed to take these calls, and they do actively pursue litigation for these people, and it kind of creates a record.
There was a question about what about the blind people?
What do you mean when you say what about blind people? Are we saying curbside voting? Are we saying assisting them with their votes? They would fall. Yeah, they would fall. They can receive assistance to help just because that would be a disability. So they would be able to, and they would have to, because they are special systems that are set up for blind, just like there are with other polls that have Braille or other kind of things. So they would be accommodated if they were voting. If someone had to come out in the voting machines, they should have something that accommodates both blind and unblind people. So they would be protected. They can get help. And the thing that when I talk about sick, one of the big things that came up in the last election cycle was COVID, right? Is that a disability that allows me to be able to vote curbside, right? If you don't have any active symptoms and you're not otherwise sick, there are rules that have been in place by those election administrators. So you want to look at what they are requiring in like Tarrant County, or what the polling places will require. Because if you have COVID-like symptoms, they probably do not want you on the inside until you could say, I am temporarily, incapacitated, and you could do the curbside voting. But that was a big issue that came up because people like, I don't want to go in and catch COVID. So I want to be separated. You're not sick though, right? And being afraid of catching COVID was not the same as actually having it. And so those were the restrictions that were put in place, because you got to be sick in order to be eligible to vote in that manner. So if I'm just afraid of catching COVID, that wasn't sufficient. But if I actually had COVID, it was.
Okay.
And so that was the situation that came up.
All right. So how do you become a poll monitor, and exactly what does a poll monitor do?
So the poll monitors, this word has a lot of implications because they're what they can do is change. But poll monitors, basically within reason, are allowed to go up and monitor voting activities at the poll, and they can report things that are happening. For example, if we see that people are not being allowed to vote curbside, then we would call that in. If people are being intimidated, meaning that you have people harassing people at the polls, or trying to tell people how to vote, or they're within a certain feet, because you got to stay within 100 feet with respect to campaigning, with respect to people come up there with guns. I remember in Arlington over there at the voting center in Mayfield, there was a whole field on the opposite side with guns. I don't know why they felt like they need to be out there with the guns, just like standing there. But it can be intimidating. But as long as they're 100 feet, there's not really a lot, within a certain distance, and they're not like at a school, because schools have their own rules, then it's permitted, right? And so that was something to think about. So as a poll monitor, if there's any activity that is happening outside that seems like that it's in violation of the rules, so you have to take training. Training is like 2 hours. It's not too late. I did put a link there. There's training that is being offered by the NAACP, and they can also tell you where you can go They give you locations that need the poll monitors after you get your training. There are a couple of more. Hold on, let me see here. I thought the Texas Civil Rights Project has some activities too. So I'm going to put their page there. You can go on there, but I've just posted the 2 for the turnout. You got the NAACP voter turnout volunteer. You also got the support NAACP ride share is another one. If you want to give people rides, it's kind of like an Uber for voting. It is free. You are volunteering though, and you are putting yourself, taking on the liability for bringing people in your car. She said, now, the best time to apply to volunteer is before the election and now. So as soon as I hang up all these links that are in the chat, and I don't know if you can put these on your Facebook or YouTube or show them, use them. But they need to, if you're going to volunteer, that should be done now because early voting starts on Monday. And most of the time, I'll be honest with you. So early voting is a great opportunity to volunteer, but election day is really when you need the people. Election day is really, really important. So just think about that. Another thing too, to keep into consideration this year is they already released the Texas Tribune, and there were a couple of news articles that were released that basically said that there is a shortage of election poll workers. A lot of election administrators have quit. Their offices have quit because of the intimidation, because of the harassment with all of the new laws, and just they are being actively pulling registration rolls to purge people. And so it's a lot of for fraud, ahead of time. So there's a lot of heat on election officials and just on those offices and those jobs. And so a lot of poll monitors, not monitors because that's volunteer, but a lot of poll workers are going to be absent on poll that day. They just don't want to deal with it. And that's sad because that means the less poll workers we have, there might be some polling locations that are not able to open because they're not staffed adequately. And so if young people, I think you can be 16 and up, they can get jobs doing this and you get paid, right? And they can do it after they get out of school. It's just a 2-week period. These are people that just want to get some quick money. These are some opportunities, right, to get an income when people are hiring. I don't know if it's too late to apply for a job because you have to go through training. So it might be, but in the next upcoming election, which will be in another 2 years, this is something to think about, or actually it might be next year. These are positions or things to think about. If you know somebody that needs a job, young people especially, I always tell them go up there and get the money and volunteer. Not volunteer because they actually get paid. The poll workers and election officials get paid, but monitors and other volunteers do not. So that's just something to think about as well.
So where do you apply to be a poll worker?
I just put it in the chat.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, I put a whole bunch of links there.
You sure did. Okay. All right. So did anybody else have any questions for Attorney Nikki? This conversation has just been wonderful.
Well, thank you.
Wonderful. I love it. Okay. Here's another question. Do you have a time frame of how long you have to volunteer?
What does that mean? Like you said, once you get approved to volunteer, it's effective for that current election season. You have to redo it every year. Because I was a poll monitor last year. I had to redo training and all of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So you and once you get trained, it's for that entire election season. Now keep in mind that if you are working for a campaign, you cannot be a poll monitor because you have to be bipartisan. You have to be someone that's nonpartisan. You can't be on a party side. And so there are some candidates that are hiring people to be poll workers to make sure that they have adequate representation at the polls. That is completely different than being a poll volunteer and a poll monitor. You can't do that. But that doesn't mean that people won't do it. They're like people that have biases won't sign up to do that. And that's the problem. You want to make sure that it's adequately represented on all sides and that it's left nonpartisan. We shouldn't be looking at party stuff when we're doing that kind of stuff.
I know we're running out of time, but I remember voting. And then when I came out, somebody asked me, did I vote Republican or Democrat? Are they supposed to do that?
Nope. And I would report it. I would report it to a poll monitor or someone that's there and point them to that person so that person can be asked to leave because they've just violated the ability to be a poll monitor or to be up there. So they would lose that right. They can't do that.
Okay.
And they need to stay within a certain distance too of the voters. We shouldn't be asking you any questions. That's not why we're up there.
Okay, and then if they're not a poll monitor or they're not associated with any of that, do they have the free right to come there and ask questions? Meaning,
I would. It depends. So there are laws about loitering. If they're not a poll monitor and they're not working there, are they working for the candidates? Right? Because if you're working for the candidates, there are certain things too. There are people that are going to come up and say, hey, consider voting for so and so. They have to be within so many miles and so many distance from the place, right? You always have the ability to tell them, I'm not sharing that with you. And if they keep harassing you, that's one thing. But if they walk away, that's fine. I've been stopped by people at the polls. Vote for so and so. Who are you? Do you know who you're voting for this? And I always, whether I'm voting for you or not, I don't engage.
All right. So my last question for you is: when are you running for office?
Stay tuned. I'm working on it. I am working on it. I'm glad you asked that. That is in my planning goals, and I am working on it because that is something that I feel very passionate about, and I will let you know.
Put me on the volunteer list.
I'm gonna put everybody on the volunteer list that was watching this show.
Put me on the campaign list, ma'am.
We have some things coming up.
See, flesh and blood didn't reveal that to me, right?
Huh?
I said flesh and blood didn't reveal that to me. I just felt that in my spirit.
Oh, yeah, it is something.
Yeah. Oh, Janet said, me too. Put her on the list. Write this name down. Write that name down.
I tell you, everybody in that list, everybody in the chat, everybody that watches on YouTube. And guys, please share this show. We took out the time to do this on Saturday because I wanted to make sure it was being done before the election started and that y'all had good information. Share this post because there are so many that need to know, especially the beginning of the post where we went through each one of the offices, because I think that's where we do ourselves a disservice. We don't know who's running and we don't understand how those offices impact us, because what that does is it allows you to look at the candidate's background and profile, right? And determine, are they a good fit? There are a couple of candidates that are running that don't, for some of the commission offices, that don't have any kind of business experience or management. And so when you're managing large funds and accounts, don't you want somebody that knows how to do that and how to delegate? I do, especially if you're going to be rolling like comptrollers and stuff like that, taxes, right?
Yeah, do your research.
These local tax property taxes and stuff. Come on. They didn't went up and up and up.
Right. Do your research. I want you to hear that in your sleep. Do your research.
And you got time.
Do your research. And then what do you think about Attorney Nikki Chriesman-Green? I would like to have her back as the host. I want her to host a couple of shows for me. So yeah, if she would consider being my host in my absence, I want her to just run the whole show however she wants to. So
I know you might.
Yeah, hold on, y'all. We gonna
topics.
we're gonna have her back as the host of Touching You Talk Show. She is gonna be an extended arm. So I am so grateful.
Elder Black, I do ask for permission for you to bring me back at the beginning of the legislative session next year, because I would like for people to know you can have, if your voice, when you see legislation being passed or you see things, you can have an impact and can go and testify at these hearings before committees and boards. There's a lot on that stake for our young people. They are rewriting the history books, and they are doing it. And it doesn't matter what side of the aisle that you're on. Doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. There's just basic tenets of history that need to be taught on both sides and in a manner and the way that our teachers are being pushed to do more than just teach, which they always have. I have so much respect for them. They're not talking about giving them more money, but they want to talk about them carrying guns and becoming security guards, while they're also having to teach them about different stuff on tests, and while they also have to worry about books and just all that stuff. So there is a lot that's going to be on the next legislative agenda, and it's going to take all of us to support one another in some of the stuff that's going to be. I've seen some policy ideas and proposals that have been out there, and they're like, y'all thought last session was crazy. This session is going to be ridiculous.
Okay, Janet did make a recommendation. She would like to see a talk show that talks about the tax laws.
Ooh, yes, that's a good one. We are actually doing a community clinic if you live in Fort Worth on November 30th. That's the tentative date. And we are going to have an attorney. It's free. It will be hosted at a church. I think Rising Star Baptist is where we're doing it. On that Wednesday, November 30th, I think 5 to 7, and we will have a tax expert there because there are a lot of laws, especially those that have personal side businesses and you use Square and Cash App and all these Zelle and all these things, PayPal to get money. Y'all need to know what to expect next year.
Okay, so it's going to be November the 30th.
November the 30th, tentatively. If it changes, I'll broadcast to you. But November the 30th, I think we said 5:30 to 7, and it will be in Fort Worth at a church. I think we said Rising Star Baptist, but we'll confirm. And we will have we'll have an attorney there as well as a tax professional that will be talking about some of the legislative updates and just things to keep in mind for the end of the year. And we'll also be talking about businesses. We'll do a quick little blurb on the PPT loans that people got and what to expect as they start doing their taxes and just a whole bunch of stuff.
Okay, I'm going to put that in there, November 30th, community clinic, and then things change, we'll let you know.
Yes. And it's free.
All
right. Mention that, free.
Free is always good. All right. Well, attorney, I am so glad to have you here. And like I said, you're an all-time favorite. I love all of my guests. I do. But thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to just speak with us and empower us and to teach us, because a lot of times we perish due to the lack of knowledge.
Yes, so, that was one of the main reasons I wanted to be an attorney. That is exactly.
So we have to make sure that we share the information that we have with everyone that we know. So I asked if you're watching this on demand, go ahead and share on your timelines. Let's get this information out to everyone so that we'll be empowered to make the decisions that are close to our heart. So again, this has been Touching You Talk Show with Elder Sheila Black and attorney Nikki Chriesman-Green. And stay tuned. She's going to be hosting some shows coming through. Yeah, she's going to definitely do that. And I'm looking forward to it. Have a great day.
Bye, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.